The widow with 3 sons had been rejected. Then the cowboy said, "We're home now, all accepted." The wind moved through the dusty streets of Red Valley like it had no mercy for anyone who stayed too long. It carried dust, broken hopes, and the smell of dry land that had not seen real rain in months. In this hard and quiet place, a woman stepped off a worn-out wagon with 3 small boys holding tightly to her skirt. Her name was Eliza Carter. She was young, but life had already written sadness on her face. Her husband had died in a mining accident far away in the hills. After that, nothing stayed the same. Their small home was taken by debt. Friends slowly disappeared. And in the end, all she had left were her children and a thin hope that somewhere there would be a place for them. Red Valley was supposed to be that place. But hope is not always welcomed. Eliza walked through the town holding her youngest son in her arms. The other 2 boys, Samuel and Noah, walked beside her quietly. They were tired, hungry, and confused, but they did not complain. They only looked at their mother, waiting for her to fix everything like she always tried to do. She stopped at a small general store and asked for work. The shopkeeper barely looked at her. He saw a widow with 3 children and quickly shook his head. "We don't need extra hands," he said. Eliza tried again at a bakery. The woman inside frowned as soon as she heard her request. "Too many mouths," the baker muttered. "We can't feed our own, let alone yours." Every door she knocked on gave the same answer. Some people were polite, but their eyes were cold. Others did not even try to hide their judgment. In Red Valley, a widow with children was not seen as someone struggling. She was seen as a burden. By afternoon, Eliza was tired, her boys were hungry, and she had no money left. She sat under a broken wooden shade near the edge of town. Samuel hugged his knees while Noah leaned against her shoulder. The youngest boy, Jacob, had fallen asleep from exhaustion. Eliza looked at the town in front of her. Smoke rose from chimneys. People walked freely. Life was going on, but not for them. She whispered softly, "We will be okay, I promise." But even she was not sure how. As the sun started to lower, a few men passed by on horseback. They slowed down when they saw her. One of them laughed quietly. "That must be the new widow," one said, "bringing bad luck and extra trouble." Another man shook his head. "3 children and no man. She won't last a week here." Their words hit Eliza like stones, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Instead, she pulled her children closer. "Don't listen," she told them gently. "We are stronger than their words." The boys nodded, though they did not fully understand. As night approached, Eliza tried one last place, a small church at the edge of town. The building was old but still standing. She thought maybe, just maybe, someone there would help. But the priest inside gave her a sad look. "We are full," he said quietly. "I wish I could help, but I cannot." Eliza stood there for a moment, holding back tears. Then she nodded politely and turned away. There was nowhere left. She walked with her children toward an old abandoned barn outside town. It was broken, but at least it had a roof. She spread an old blanket on the ground and helped her sons lie down. Jacob slept quickly. Samuel stayed awake, staring at the cracks in the wooden roof. "Mother," he whispered, "are we going to be okay here?" Eliza brushed his hair softly. "Yes," she said, though her voice was tired. "We only need a little time." But deep inside, she knew time was something she did not have much of. Outside the barn, the wind grew stronger. The night in Red Valley was never kind. It reminded people that survival here was not easy. It was a fight. Far away from the town lights, on a hill overlooking the valley, a lone rider sat on his horse. His name was Cole Maddox. He watched the town in silence. He was known as a man who kept to himself, someone who avoided trouble and people alike. But tonight, his eyes were not on the town. They were on the broken barn, where a woman and 3 children had just settled. He did not move. He did not speak. But something in him changed slightly as he watched them try to survive in a place that had already decided to reject them. And for the first time in a long while, Cole Maddox did not turn away. The night in Red Valley was cold and quiet, but not peaceful. The wind moved through broken fences and empty streets like it was searching for something it could not find. In the old barn outside town, Eliza Carter sat awake, listening to her 3 sons breathe softly as they slept on the rough ground. She had covered them with an old blanket, the only one she had. Her arms were tired, her eyes heavy, but her mind would not rest. Every word spoken to her during the day kept coming back. Too many mouths. Bad luck. Not needed here. Eliza looked at her children. Samuel had curled up close to his younger brother. Noah still held a small piece of bread he had saved from earlier. Little Jacob slept peacefully, unaware of the struggle around him. She smiled sadly. Even in the hardest moments, her children gave her reason to keep going. Outside, the barn creaked with the wind. The roof had small holes, and cold air slipped inside. Eliza pulled her sons closer and whispered, "I will not fail you, no matter what happens." But deep inside, she felt the weight of loneliness. Red Valley had closed its doors on her. There was no work, no shelter, and no kindness waiting for them. Far from the barn, on a hill above the valley, a lone rider watched quietly. It was Cole Maddox. He sat on his horse, still and silent, like part of the night itself. His hat was low over his eyes, and his face showed no emotion. People in Red Valley knew him as a man who stayed away from trouble. Some said he lost his family long ago. Others said he simply did not care about anyone anymore. But tonight, something was different. His eyes stayed on the barn where Eliza and her sons were resting. He had seen many struggling families before, but something about this one stayed in his mind. A woman with no one to protect her, holding on to children with nothing but hope. Cole slowly moved his horse down the hill. He did not know why. He did not question it. He just moved. The sound of hooves was soft as he approached the edge of the barn. He stopped a few meters away and looked at it. It was broken, weak, and barely safe for animals, let alone people. He dismounted quietly and walked closer. Inside, Eliza heard a sound. Her body tensed immediately. She stood up quickly, placing herself between the entrance and her children. "Who is there?" she called out, trying to stay calm. There was silence for a moment. Then Cole's voice came from outside. "Just passing through." Eliza hesitated. She had learned not to trust strangers easily. Still, something in his voice was calm, not threatening. She slowly stepped toward the door and opened it slightly. In the dim light, she saw a tall man standing outside. His clothes were worn, his face quiet, and his eyes distant. He did not look like the others in town. He looked tired, like someone who had carried too much for too long. "What do you want?" she asked carefully. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he glanced inside the barn, seeing the children sleeping on the ground. "No harm," he said simply. "I saw the storm coming. This place won't hold." Eliza looked up at the sky. Clouds were moving in fast. A storm was indeed forming. "I have nowhere else," she admitted quietly. Cole nodded once. He turned and walked to his horse. Without another word, he returned with a few supplies, an old lantern, a sack of dry wood, and a blanket. He placed them near the entrance. "You should use this," he said. Eliza looked at the items, surprised. "Why are you helping us?" Cole paused. For a moment, he did not answer. Then he said, "Because no one else will." He did not wait for thanks. He simply stepped back. But Eliza spoke again. "Wait." He stopped. "I don't even know your name." He looked at her briefly. "Cole." Then he turned and walked away into the dark. Inside the barn, Eliza stood still for a long time. The supplies lay near her feet. She looked at them, then at her sleeping children. For the first time since arriving in Red Valley, someone had not rejected her. He had not promised her a home. He had not offered a future. But he had offered something small: help. Outside, Cole stood at a distance, watching the barn one last time before disappearing into the night. He told himself it meant nothing, just a passing moment, but deep down, something had already begun to change, and neither of them knew it yet. Morning came slowly over Red Valley, but it did not bring peace. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavier than before. Inside the old barn, Eliza Carter woke early, checking on her 3 sons. They were still asleep, their small bodies curled together for warmth. The supplies Cole had left were still there. The lantern, the dry wood, and the blanket felt like a small shield against the cold night they had survived. Eliza looked at them for a long moment. She did not fully understand why a stranger would help them, but she felt something she had not felt in days: hope. She quietly started a small fire using the wood. Soon the barn was a little warmer. Samuel woke up first. "Mother, it's warm," he said softly, surprised. "Yes," Eliza replied with a gentle smile. "Someone helped us." The boys sat up, looking at the supplies. Even little Jacob smiled, holding the blanket tightly. For a short moment, the world felt a little less cruel. But outside the barn, Red Valley was not ready to change. By mid-morning, Eliza took her children into town again. She needed work. She needed food. She needed a place where they could stay safely. She walked with steady steps, even though her body was tired. Samuel held her hand. Noah walked close behind. Jacob sat on her hip. They first went to the general store again. The same shopkeeper looked at her with the same cold eyes. "You again?" he said. "I will work for food," Eliza said firmly. Anything you need. The man shook his head. We already told you, no work. She tried to stay calm. I can clean, cook, help, anything. But the answer did not change. No. She stepped outside slowly, trying not to show her disappointment to her children. Next, she went to the bakery. The woman there didn't even let her finish speaking. We don't hire problems, the baker said sharply. Eliza felt her heart sink, but she did not argue. She just turned away. The same thing happened at every place. Some people avoided her, some whispered, some looked at her children like they were unwanted guests in their town. By afternoon, Eliza stood in the middle of the street, feeling more tired than before. Her sons were quiet now. They were learning what rejection felt like. Samuel finally spoke. Mother, why don't they like us? Eliza knelt down in front of him. She held his shoulders gently. It is not about you, she said softly. Some people just forget kindness. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of her own words. As they walked back toward the barn, a group of men on horses passed by. They slowed when they saw her. One of them laughed. Still here? He said. That widow doesn't give up. Another man added. She should leave before she brings more trouble to this town. Eliza kept walking. She did not respond. But her silence was not weakness. It was survival. That evening, something worse happened. A land officer arrived near the barn with two men. They carried papers. Eliza stepped forward, confused. This land is not allowed for living, the officer said. You must move. Eliza's heart tightened. I have nowhere else. The officer looked at her briefly, but his decision was already made. Rules are rules. The men began checking the area, marking things down. Eliza stood still, holding her children behind her. For the first time, fear replaced her hope. That night, Cole Maddox returned from the hills. He saw the men near the barn and stopped his horse. His eyes narrowed slightly. He approached quietly. What is happening here? He asked. The officer turned. This land is being cleared. Unauthorized stay. Cole looked toward the barn. Eliza stood there with her children, silent but tense. He stepped forward. They are not hurting anyone, Cole said calmly. The officer replied, That is not the point. Cole's voice stayed steady. It should be. A long silence followed. The tension in the air grew stronger. The men did not move, and neither did Cole. Finally, the officer said, If you support them, you will be responsible too. Cole did not hesitate. Then I am. Eliza looked at him, surprised. She had not expected him to stand there again, especially not like this. The officer frowned but said nothing more. He signaled his men and left, warning that the matter would return. When they were gone, silence filled the space again. Eliza stepped closer to Cole. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Cole looked at her. Yes, I did. Her eyes softened slightly. Why? Cole did not answer immediately. He looked at her children instead. Because they already decided you don't belong, he said. Someone had to disagree. Eliza did not speak. For the first time, she felt something stronger than rejection. She felt protection. But far away in Red Valley, this act of defiance had already begun to spread, and not everyone would accept it. The sky over Red Valley was dark that morning, but it was not from clouds alone. Something heavier was in the air. Tension, anger, and change all mixed together. Eliza Carter stood outside the old barn with her three sons close to her. They had packed their small belongings in silence. The land officer's warning had made everything uncertain again. Even the small hope they had started building now felt fragile. Samuel held a small cloth bag. Noah looked around like he was trying to remember the place. Little Jacob stayed close to his mother, not fully understanding why they had to move again. Eliza tried to stay strong, but her eyes showed tiredness. She had been rejected too many times. Each time she stood back up, life pushed harder. Nearby, Cole Maddox stood with his horse. He was watching the road that led into town. He had not spoken much that morning, but his presence felt steady, like something solid in a breaking world. You don't have to come with us, Eliza said quietly. Cole looked at her. You don't either, he replied. She understood what he meant. There was still a choice. But where could she go? Red Valley had closed its doors long ago. Before she could answer, the sound of horses broke the silence. A group of men arrived from town. At the front was the land officer again, this time with more men behind him. Their faces were firm. Their purpose was clear. This is the final notice, the officer said loudly. Leave this land immediately. Eliza stepped forward, holding her sons behind her. We are not hurting anyone, she said. We only need a place to stay. The officer shook his head. The decision is made. Cole moved slightly in front of Eliza. His presence alone changed the air. She has nowhere else, Cole said calmly. That is not our problem, the officer replied. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then Cole said something that surprised everyone. Then make it our problem. The officer frowned. What does that mean? Cole looked directly at him. This land is being used unfairly. Everyone knows it. The records are not clean. You are pushing people out for profit, not law. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably. The officer's face tightened. You are making serious accusations, he said. I am stating truth, Cole replied. Eliza stood behind him, listening. She had never seen him speak this much before. There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. Cole continued. She is not a threat. Her children are not a problem. If this town cannot accept that, then the problem is not her. The crowd behind the officer grew silent. People from nearby houses had started watching. Word had spread quickly about the widow and the cowboy standing against the town's decision. The officer looked around, realizing the attention. This ends now, he said sharply. But something had already changed. An older man from the town stepped forward, then another. Slowly, people began speaking up. She has worked hard, one woman said quietly. They never caused trouble, said another. Whispers grew into voices. The town was no longer fully silent. Cole stepped closer to Eliza. You don't have to fight alone anymore, he said softly. Eliza looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but something inside her was finally breaking open. Not in sadness, but in relief. The officer, seeing the shift, lowered his papers slightly. The power he held was not as strong as before. After a long pause, he finally spoke. This land will be reviewed, he said. Until then, no eviction. It was not victory, but it was not defeat either. The men left slowly, less confident than before. As the dust settled, silence returned again, but this time, it felt different. Eliza turned to Cole. What happens now? She asked. Cole looked at the barn, then at the open land around it. For the first time, his expression softened. Now, he said, you stop surviving and start living. Days passed. The town did not forget what happened. Some still judged, but many had started to see Eliza differently. Work slowly became available again. Small kindnesses returned in quiet ways, a loaf of bread left at the door, a smile instead of a cold stare. Cole stayed near, helping without asking for anything in return. He fixed the barn properly, turning it into a safe home. He built fences, repaired tools, and made sure the land could support living again. Eliza watched all of it, slowly understanding something she had not believed before. Not everyone leaves when life gets hard. Some people stay and rebuild. One evening, as the sun set over Red Valley, Eliza stood outside the new home with her 3 sons. The house was simple, but it was strong. Samuel ran inside laughing. Noah followed. Little Jacob held Cole's hand for a moment before going in too. Eliza stood still, watching them. Cole stood beside her. It's not much, he said. Eliza shook her head. It's everything we didn't have before. A soft wind passed through the valley. This time it did not feel cruel. Eliza looked at Cole. We were never accepted here before, she said. Cole looked at the home, then at the children inside. We are now, he replied quietly. Eliza nodded slowly. For the first time, she did not feel like a stranger. She felt like she had finally arrived somewhere she belonged. And as the light faded over Red Valley, the story of a rejected widow and a quiet cowboy became something else. A story of a home built not by land, but by acceptance.